Every targeting system has an error rate. A human sniper misidentifies a target. An airstrike hits the wrong building. A drone strike kills a civilian who was near someone on a list. These are not hypothetical edge cases. They are documented recurring features of every military campaign in history. What AI targeting systems have introduced is not error itself. It is the systematic, deliberate setting of error as a parameter. Before an AI system is deployed in a targeting role, someone makes a decision. At what rate of error is this system acceptable to use? What percentage of the names it generates, the targets it identifies, the people it flags? What percentage can be wrong before the system is considered too inaccurate? That question has been answered, not publicly, not in any document available for review. But in the operational deployment of every AI targeting system documented in these videos, someone set a number. The only case in which we know that number, because officers inside the system said so, is Lavender, 10%. One name in 10 on a kill list of 37,000 was probably the wrong person. For every other system, the number is classified, but the number exists. Someone decided it, and people died at the rate it permitted. To understand what margin of error means in AI targeting, you need to distinguish between two separate problems that are often collapsed into one. The first is classification error. The system identifies the wrong person as a target. The AI processes surveillance data, location history, communication patterns, behavioral signatures, and concludes that a specific individual is a militant operative. That conclusion is wrong. The person was not what the system said they were. The second is collateral damage. The system correctly identifies a target, but the strike that follows kills additional people who were not the target. Family members, neighbors, bystanders who happen to be in the same building or vicinity at the moment of impact. These are different problems with different causes, but they share a structural feature. Both are calculated in advance and accepted as parameters. With Lavender, both were documented. The classification error rate was approximately 10%, the military's own internal figure. The collateral damage ceiling was separate. For low-ranking targets, up to 15 to 20 civilian deaths per strike were authorized. For senior commanders, that ceiling exceeded 100. These were not failures of the system. They were specifications of it. The engineers and commanders who built Lavender knew it would misidentify roughly 1 in 10 targets. They chose to deploy it anyway. The officers who reviewed targets for 20 seconds knew they were approving strikes that would kill people beyond the intended target. They approved them anyway. The collateral damage ceiling was a design choice, not an accident. The moral weight of an error rate changes entirely when applied at scale. A 10% error rate on a list of 10 names means one wrongly identified person. That is a serious failure. A life potentially ended on the basis of incorrect data. But it is a discrete, bounded event. A 10% error rate on a list of 37,000 names means 3,700 people. 3,700 individuals flagged by a machine that was wrong about them, whose names appeared on a kill list, against whom strikes were authorized in some cases before the error could be identified or corrected. The number is not hypothetical. It is the direct mathematical product of the acknowledged accuracy rate applied to the documented list size. This is not a new concept in military ethics. The doctrine of proportionality in international humanitarian law has always required commanders to weigh expected civilian harm against anticipated military advantage. Militaries have always operated with the knowledge that their actions would cause some unintended deaths. What AI targeting changes is the velocity and volume at which these calculations are executed. A human targeting process might produce dozens of strike authorizations over days or weeks, with individual reviews at each step. An AI targeting system produces thousands of assessments per hour. The same error rate that produces a handful of wrongly identified individuals under a manual process produces hundreds or thousands under an automated one. The mathematics of acceptable error is not new. The scale at which it is being applied is. International humanitarian law's principle of proportionality requires that the expected harm to civilians from a strike be proportionate to the anticipated military advantage. The assessment is inherently subjective. It requires a commander to weigh incommensurable values, but it presupposes a human being making a judgment about a specific situation. AI targeting systems introduce a structural tension with that requirement. When Lavender flagged a low-ranking operative, someone described by officers as having a marginal role in an armed group, the authorized collateral damage ceiling was 15 to 20 civilian deaths. That ceiling was set not for the specific individual strike, but as a standing parameter for the entire category of low-ranking targets. A commander applying proportionality in the traditional sense evaluates each situation individually. This specific target, this specific location, this specific civilian presence, this specific military value. The result is a judgment about whether this particular strike is proportionate. A parameter-based system applies a predetermined ceiling across thousands of identical category targets. The proportionality assessment is not individual, it is categorical. Every low-ranking target in Gaza is worth up to 20 civilian deaths, regardless of the specific circumstances of the specific strike. Whether that categorical approach satisfies the proportionality requirement in international humanitarian law, which was written for individual human judgment, is a question no court has yet answered. The systems have been deployed. The strikes have occurred. The legal question remains unresolved. Lavender's 10% figure is the only publicly known error rate for any operational AI targeting system. It is known only because officers with first-hand knowledge chose to speak to investigators. Project Maven has been operational for 8 years. No error rate has been disclosed. The system has been used in active strike environments across multiple continents. The number of assessments it generated that were incorrect, that identified the wrong person, the wrong vehicle, the wrong behavioral pattern as a threat, is not publicly known. The same is true of every other military AI targeting system currently deployed. The systems exist. They generate outputs. Strikes are authorized based on those outputs, and the rate at which those outputs are wrong has never been independently evaluated or publicly disclosed for any of them. This is not a regulatory gap that exists because no one thought to require disclosure. It is a deliberate feature of how these systems are classified and deployed. The error rate of a military AI targeting system is operationally sensitive information. Disclosing it tells adversaries how to defeat the system, what profile to maintain, what behaviors to avoid, what patterns generate false negatives. From a military perspective, keeping the error rate secret makes sense. The problem is that the people most affected by the error rate are not adversaries exploiting it for tactical advantage. They are civilians and wrongly identified individuals who have no tactical interest in the system's accuracy, only a human interest in not being killed by it. The decision about what error rate is acceptable for a military AI targeting system is made inside a closed process involving military lawyers, targeting doctrine specialists, commanders, and sometimes national security oversight bodies. It is not a public decision. It is not subject to democratic review. It is not disclosed to the populations over whom the system is deployed. In the United States, the Department of Defense Directive 3000-09, first issued in 2012 and updated in 2023, establishes requirements for human judgment in lethal autonomous systems. The directive does not specify an acceptable error rate. It requires that systems be designed to minimize the probability of unintended engagements. What minimized means is not defined. For Lavender, the acceptable error rate appears to have been set by military commanders within the operational chain, informed by the system's own reported accuracy figures and by doctrine about what level of misidentification is operationally acceptable. No external body reviewed that decision, no court approved it, no international agreement governed it. The decision that 1 in 10 names on a kill list could be wrong was made by people with military authority and military objectives, operating within a classification framework that prevented any outside evaluation. The 3,700 people who were probably wrongly flagged had no access to the decision-making process that placed their names on the list. They had no mechanism to challenge it. Most never knew they were on it. There is a phrase used in targeting doctrine: acceptable losses. It has always been understood in military ethics as a phrase that should make people uncomfortable. Losses are not things to be optimized for. They are harms to be minimized, constrained, and accounted for. AI targeting systems have introduced a more precise version of the same concept: acceptable error rate. The word acceptable suggests a threshold that has been considered and found tolerable. In the case of Lavender, that threshold was 10%. In the case of Project Maven, it is unknown. In the case of every other deployed AI targeting system, it is unknown. What is not unknown is that the threshold exists. Every deployed AI targeting system that has ever generated an output that led to a strike authorization has an implicit error rate, a rate at which it is wrong, which was deemed acceptable enough to proceed. The systems would not have been deployed otherwise. The question that no legal framework, no international treaty, and no democratic process has yet addressed is this. Who has the authority to decide that a given error rate is acceptable? At what point does an error rate, 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 100, become unacceptable? And who bears responsibility for the people who fall within the error, not because of what they did, but because of what a machine incorrectly concluded about them? Those questions are not being decided in courtrooms or in parliamentary debates. They are being decided by default, inside classified military programs, by people whose names and reasoning are not part of any public record. The margin of error in AI targeting is not a technical footnote. It is the central moral fact of every system documented in this channel. Lavender's 37,000 targets were not 37,000 militants. They were 37,000 people, an algorithm assessed as probable militants, at a confidence level that the military calculated would be wrong approximately 3,700 times. That calculation was made deliberately. The number was set intentionally. The system was deployed with full knowledge of what the error rate meant at scale. The next video examines a specific documented case in which those numbers were not just set, but were expanded. The case in which Israel's AI systems authorized up to 50 civilian deaths per strike for certain target categories, and the internal documents that revealed it.